What do you think some of the biggest mistakes costing YouTubers the most money or views or subscribers is?
Worked with a channel yesterday who was like working really hard, been at this for years trying to grow his channel, and he's at like a little over 5,000 subscribers. But he's like, for the hundreds of videos I've done, the amount of time I've been doing this, like I should be further ahead. And I was like, dude, like I watched a lot of your videos to prep for our session, and like I still don't really know what I'm gonna get in the next video.
Hey guys, listen in to this amazing podcast episode with Tim from Video Creators. He was on this in 2005. He was actually helping train YouTube employees before Google even bought YouTube. So there is so much value that Tim shares in this podcast episode. He has worked with companies like Disney, Warner Brothers, HBO, and all of these other amazing brands which he's helped grow. So listen in, it's an amazing podcast episode. So Tim, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
So starting out, I would love to know how you sort of got started, how you sort of came up with the idea to help YouTube creators. And I know you've been in the game for a while, so YouTube's probably changed a lot over the years. So take us back to like how you got the idea to start coaching YouTubers and building YouTubers, and kind of like when that started.
Yeah, it was kind of an accident, actually. So I was in graduate school back in 2002, 3, 4, and 5. And I started dating this girl and wanted to introduce her to my family halfway across the country. And back then there was no Facebook or anything like that yet. YouTube had just started in 2005. And so it was March 2nd, 2006, I uploaded my very first video to YouTube. And I just wanted to know, could I get a video off of my camera and onto YouTube? And thankfully, I was able to succeed at getting it off my magnetic 8mm tape, if you remember those old school cameras. And so we started then making videos, my girlfriend and I, because I thought like, hey, we can make these videos, post them on YouTube, and I could just send the links to my families and friends back home, and then they could get to know this girl and things. They wouldn't have to download an MOV file that I'd have to figure out how to attach to an email and all that kind of stuff. And so we started making these little videos that today would be known as vlogs, but back then that wasn't a word. It was just being awkward in public with your camera, right? And we would just go out and make little videos of us going out to the park, going out to eat, going out to movies, or just like whatever. And we post them on YouTube, and I'd send the links to them. It was great. But then other people started watching. And in those days, it wasn't like today. Like back then, MySpace was relatively new, and traditional media was like warning you against using sites like MySpace because you're putting your personal information out on the internet, and people are hunting you down. They wanted to kill you for some reason. And I was like, oh no. So I was concerned, and I was like, who is CatLicker72? And why do they keep commenting on my videos? How are they finding me? How are they coming? Why do they keep coming back? And back in 2005, 2006, 2007, a lot of other people were starting to develop those same questions. And they're like, we don't know, Tim. Those are good questions. If you figure it out, let us know. And so I, being the good RPG gamer that I was, really like algorithms of like this amount of like damage with this amount of shield and that amount of like that character trait with this environment, blah, blah, blah. This is a whole bunch of math happening really, really fast. And then it would just like, you know, all this stuff happens, and here's the outcome. And so I really liked that. I had that skill from a few other things with like music theory and things in the past too. So when it came to YouTube, it was like a natural place for me to figure out this amount of views from this audience and this amount of time on this channel with like blah, 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 right? And then like, this is how it works. So I started figuring out the system. Before long, YouTube was like, hey, you need to train our employees how YouTube works, because like no one here, like this is before they were bought by Google, they were like, no one here really knows how this things work. Like we all have our individual areas, but no one knows like the big picture like you do. So I started helping with new employee training at YouTube way back in the day. And then it just kind of developed as I started being in the right place at the right time. At that time, I married that girl. We kept going on YouTube. I think from our engagement to our honeymoon to our wedding, our first house and first job and everything. And at that time, we were doing about 1 million people a month, and which was unheard of back then. And so other people are like, "How are you doing this? How is this working?" And so we started breaking it down, helping other people, and I really loved it because I saw this as a tremendous opportunity to reach more people and change their lives, which is, as a youth and family worker at the time, was what I was like really, really excited about. And so long story short, I ended up then doing YouTube strategy for Disney and for Warner Brothers and eBay and Budweiser and HBO, and just recently working with MTV and Twitch and even YouTube themselves in other capacities. Started our own agency now where we work with established creators, helping them with their own content strategy so that they can continue to grow their audience and grow their business. And ultimately, what we get excited about is using those things to reach more people and change their lives with the messages that we're spreading. So that's the short story. Sorry.
No, that's super interesting. And it's amazing how early you got into vlogging and then also how you continued it. And you were saying that's 1 million views a month back in what year?
Oh, man. It was like 2000. Let's see, we got married in 2006, so it was like 2007, 8, if I remember correctly. It was like right around the time we were getting married, and people were like diving into our story, and people, were just really engaging with it, and we're like, okay.
That's amazing. It would have been most of Google's user base, probably.
Yeah, I don't think Google had bought them yet. Let's see, Google bought them in, what year did they buy them?
I have no idea.
I had to do a Google search. I don't remember we're talking like more than a decade ago. A lot of the timeline gets a little fuzzy, but in terms of the exact specifics. But it was back in the very early days, and then started training other people, and ended up on the industry side of YouTube really before there even was like a YouTube industry. So
okay, got it. And so I take it the first stream of revenue that you made from YouTube was actually the consultation side of things. And did you kind of like quickly start doing that once YouTube asked you to start sort of training new employees and stuff?
Well, the very first revenue was the AdSense. It wasn't AdSense. It was the partner program. And that was when it was invite only program. So it wasn't open to everyone like it is now. And so I got invited pretty early into that program, and we started, making money from that. So we started off, as a normal traditional YouTuber, basically, and before we went into started doing the client services, which so far today we've helped our clients generate over 17 billion views on YouTube and around 80 million subscribers of growth we can actually take credit for, not like, they came to us with this number of views and so we're taking credit for it or something. Content we've actually worked on with our clients. So, so we turned it into a pretty reproducible process.
Yeah, and a quick question on the AdSense when it first started. What was that monetization like back then when YouTube just started compared to what it is now?
Well, yeah, back then it was invite only, so like you could request, but there was always like, no, it was a very limited program, which has some benefits. The benefits of it are for the creator and for YouTube is that if you have limited inventory, you can charge more for that inventory. And so the CPMs were a lot higher. And then when they opened it up to everyone, the CPMs tanked because now you had almost unlimited inventory and not as much demand. And I think now it's starting to change a little bit. It's still not as high now as it was back when it was invite only. But the people who are, and I think it was the right move for YouTube to take because it encouraged a lot of other people to get in rather than thinking that. But Facebook, I think, did the same way. They did it purposely, their monetization, which was this invite only. We only offered to a few people in order to keep our inventory limited, and then we'll broaden it as the more and more advertisers come on board. So I think that was probably the right way to do it, but yeah.
And then, so these were like individual buys that YouTube were doing. Like, who were the types of people advertising that early on YouTube?
I don't remember. I don't remember the ads. I know I saw them all the time, but there was also back then though, there was almost a little bit of a you're a sellout now because now you're not doing it. Like when you started having ads on your content, it was actually like a negative thing, and you're always weighing this consequence of like making money off of this versus like being a sellout and kind of annoying my audience. Now that that is totally gone, right? No one thinks about that or cares or even notices anymore because everyone's got ads across the entire platform. But back then, that was like a conscious decision that you had to make, and we got in on it early and got the like, oh, we have ads. I'm not watching your channel again. You're like, oh, okay, sorry. I guess
that's fine. There's plenty of others.
Yeah,
and that's what's super interesting. Do you think it's better now that everybody has ads and it's kind of blanketed, or do you think it was better back in the day when it was probably more targeted and the exclusive access was around?
I don't know the answer to that. I mean, better is relative to who's it better for, but in some ways, so there's pros and cons both ways. The pros is like, in opening it up is that it's available to more and more people, and there's a better system in place for getting people monetized. And the downside is that there's more and more inventory, and so like CPMs overall are declined. But YouTube's kind of fixed that because now they have different programs where they have like Google Preferred and other like top tier creators. So if you want to get in front of them, you can't go through the normal AdSense auction. You've got to work with YouTube directly to buy ads on like top tier channels, and those CPMs are significantly higher than what you'll just get through the AdSense auction. But so it's has some pros to it, and I think YouTube's trying to mitigate the cons. But I don't know if I can answer if it was better or worse.
Yeah. So for creators, how important is a high CPM? And what should a creator who's looking to start doing this look for? Because I know the CPMs range hugely, depending on what the content is.
Most of the creators we work with now, thankfully, like years ago, it was like CPMs was a big thing, and so you join a YouTube network, if you remember what those things were, to get like a higher CPM. And here what we're basically talking about is like we're fighting for like an extra $1 or $2 per 1,000 views, and if you're getting millions and millions of views, it adds up, sure, but here's like really simple math. And this is why like we don't really care about AdSense anymore. And the clients that we work with, we encourage them to take AdSense as like the cherry on top, but nothing you can really bank on because you don't predict the YouTube algorithm systems. You don't know, like your channel might be really solid for a couple of years, but that's not to say that your top performing videos are suddenly going to stop performing. And if it's all based on ad revenue, that's a really risky place to be from a business because you don't control that. So we definitely encourage our clients, and most of them are already thinking this way anyway, thankfully, but about growing a business around their audience rather than making the business the actual audience. So there's two different models here. The one business model is like, I am growing a business around, let me say this differently, actually. When you are making money because you're selling advertising or because you're doing brand deals and sponsorships and things, you're making money because you have a product to sell, and that product is your viewers' eyeballs. And so the advertiser will come and be like, hey, we'll pay you $5,000 for you to do a sponsored video. And the only reason that math makes sense for the brand is because they look at your audience, they're like, we're going to pay them $5,000, but their audience is probably going to generate about $25,000 for us. Right. And so the creator, otherwise the math breaks down, the brand stopped paying and sponsorships would have been dead a long time ago, but they're not, because your audience is actually more valuable than the $5,000 in this example that you're taking for the brand deal. And the way we look at it is like, if my audience is worth $25,000 and I'm selling them for $5,000, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I would rather develop my own product and my own business, cut out all the middlemen, and sell directly to my audience something that is exactly what they need. And I don't have to keep going from deal to deal to deal and just always wondering like, oh, what's next month's brand deal? And like, I don't really want to sell this thing, but I need the money, so I'll talk about it and figure out a way to force a square peg into a round hole at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But if you have your own product, you can keep going. And so if you get like, let's say you get like a $5 RPM, which is like what comes to you after everything else is split. You get $5 per 1,000 views. And let's say you get a brand that's going to pay you let's say $20, like a solid $20 RPM. So that now you're getting $25 per 1,000 views on YouTube. But some creators are like, that's amazing. But let's say you have a $30 product and you convert 1% of the audience into a sale. That's 10 sales at $30. That's $300 per 1,000 views versus $25 per 1,000 views on a good day, right? So it's like at some point the ad revenue just doesn't even make sense from a business perspective either. So
Okay.
I can keep going on that, but I'll let you talk. Sorry.
So I was going to say it's super interesting because I know a lot of brands, a lot of individuals and personalities are going to build that audience, focus on the ad dollars from the from YouTube, and then so you're saying it's actually better to build the audience and sell the product. What sort of products are you seeing YouTubers sell really well after they've sort of built the audience, or are they building the audience before the product, or are they building the product before the audience? What's your sort of view on
it's
this?
It's actually a common mistake to jump straight to the product, because what you first need to figure out, and a lot of this is very normal, very common. Like a lot of YouTube creators will be like, "Oh, I have X amount of audience now, so I should start selling merch, or I should start a Patreon." And they just jump straight to the product, and then they're like, "Why is no one buying my stuff?" And it falls flat, and then they think, "No, Tim, that doesn't work." And the problem is, like, we just skip the more important steps, which is you got to think more like a business person now and less like just a creator who wants to make cool stuff and hopefully have it reach a lot of people. Instead, from the business perspective, it's like we really need to know who our target audience is. Like in business world, they call it your customer avatar. Who is this person we're going after, and how do we craft our content to attract that most ideal customer to our? So the changes now from being like a media company, which is where our job is to get the most number of eyeballs possible and sell that, to instead, this is like, it is better for us to be in front of 10 of the right people than 1,000 of the wrong people. So who is that right person that we're going after? Let's craft a content strategy for them. The second thing that the creator then needs to figure out is, well, what value am I providing to these people, this audience? And normally for like an educational type channel, it comes down to like, I'm teaching them something that they want to know, which still is only half the truth. They really don't want to know something. They want the benefit or the reward that knowing this actually does for them. But for an entertainment channel, like let's say your vloggers and your gamers and your personality-based channels, there's a different value there. And sometimes it's educational, but sometimes it's also like a relational value or a community value. No one consumes content just because, like, everyone only consumes content because it's doing something for them. It's valuable to them in some way. And most creators just haven't figured out what that is yet, which is why their channels end up going all over the place, and momentum becomes really hard to predict. And that's when they get stuck. Like sometimes a video does really well, and sometimes it just flops. And I have no idea how to predict one versus the other because they haven't really defined what value they're trying to deliver. And then now their audience has all these different reasons. One person subscribed because the person's from my hometown. Another person subscribed because, that they were really funny in that one video. And this other person subscribes because they learned something. But then like the next video, that person didn't learn anything. They're out. Then you move to a different town, that person's out. And then your next 3 videos aren't as funny as the other one. So that person's out, right? So it's really hard to have predictable growth without defining this is the value that I'm predictably delivering every single time. I'm growing a brand around delivering this value so that every video I publish, people like don't even care what the title and thumbnail is anymore. It's like, dude, perfect. Like they're just going to click and watch because they know they deliver every single time.
Got it.
So once you figure that out, then you can start figuring out, how do I sell this value and provide the same value they're getting for free, but provide 10x that same value in a format they're willing to pay for. And then that can lead to a lot of different places rather than just jumping to merch or Patreon or something. So does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah. And so how do you usually help brands discover what their value is and why their audience is watching their channel over, like, there's so many channels that people can watch. How do you sort of narrow in on what the value of your channel is and why people are watching your channel?
It's a process that would make more sense if you watched it unfold than it would for me to just explain it to you. But if I'm going to break it down to steps, the first step is usually hey, tell me the backstory of how you got started on YouTube. What brought it? How did we get to where we are here today? And what we're listening for there is more like the beliefs that person held, because the strongest communities, online and offline, they don't revolve around common interests or different genres or even niches. They revolve around shared beliefs. And so we were trying to figure out what's that belief that when your audience hears it, they're going to be like, oh, like, where have you been my whole life? This is, and one way we can get there is through hearing their backstory. Another way then is like, well, just finish this sentence. Like, hey guys, subscribe to my channel because blank. And you'd be surprised how many creators are like, oh my goodness, I have no idea what to say there. And we're not suggesting that you need to say something like that in every video, but it reveals the problem that not even the creator themselves knows what's that thread that ties all their content together. What's the through line that makes their brand make sense to a new viewer, first time viewer, or to a potential customer. And then it's working. It's a longer process. You can usually get to a somewhat workable place in about an hour or two, but it's certainly not like snap your fingers. But it's then defining like, well, who are we going after here? Who do you get passionate about reaching, and things like that too. So and then it kind of helps us get to this point of really articulating, this is what we're about, this is what we're not about, and how do we communicate that clearly so a first-time viewer quickly is like, oh, I'm in the right spot, I need to subscribe and get more here.
Okay, got it. And then for that, the B2B space is tough. So how did you get your first sort of like 10,000 subs, or even maybe 100,000 subs for you in the B2B space? Because I do know those channels are a little bit harder to grow when you're looking at, the more boring topics rather than kind of like, the Mr. Beast. Sort of like engagement based off entertainment.
Well, the first step that we do, and we've worked with several B2B businesses as clients, and the first thing we have to remind them is like there is not really there is, but there's on YouTube is not such a thing as like B2B. On YouTube is still person to person. Now, the person watching might represent a business, but we're still talking about ultimately how do we connect with people? How do we connect with the right people? So in that sense, the conversation really isn't that much different than a B2C. They have these limiting beliefs in that framework that make them think that like, oh, I'm trying to connect with the business versus a customer. Connecting with a customer makes more natural sense to them because they're thinking about it in terms of connecting with a person. But in a B2B setting, you're still connecting with a person who's going to represent that business and reach out to you and want to work with you as like a business, right? Not just as like an individual. So we do the same exact, maybe not the same exact thing, but pretty close to the same thing. We're like, tell me about the person who works at this business that you would want to connect with. And we start getting to know that person really well, and the things that they're struggling with in their job, the problems they're trying to solve. And so when we work with, and I can't, unfortunately, I'm under NDA, so I can't say give you actual examples that we've done this with. But you would certainly recognize the brands, and it worked very successfully then as we shift the mindset from going B2B and still like person to person, basically.
Okay.
So
businesses trying to, use YouTube as a channel, they really need to like break it down into like, okay, who's going to be the brand person of our channel, or even multiple people, and then what's going to attract, people to those interesting conversations that they might be having.
Right. Yep. Yeah. So let's say you are a software company that is trying to get project managers and other businesses to sign up for your service, and then they're going to have the rest of the people on their team use your software for project management. So instead of saying we're trying to connect with other businesses, we're like, okay, who's that project manager, and what problems are they trying to solve, and what pressure they may be feeling from their boss? Like when we try to get to know the target audience, it's not just demographic info like age and gender and median income and geographic location and stuff like that. It's like, what is this person's story? Who are they? What problems do they have? What are they feeling right now? What's at stake for them if they don't solve this problem? And what do, in their words, how they describe the problem? How are they going out and trying to find solutions? Sometimes they don't even know what to search for. And sometimes they're not even searching for it, and they just see the problem. This is what I love about YouTube, is that if you make the right content for the right person, YouTube search and discovery systems will just put that video in front of them at the right time, whether it be on the homepage or suggested. Yeah, so we're like, YouTube systems are designed to target people. A lot of people get this wrong, and I'm going a little bit off topic here, but I'll bring it back, which is that people think like that YouTube is trying to find viewers for their videos. But it's actually the opposite. YouTube is trying to find videos for viewers. It's a viewer-centric system. So if you think about it from that perspective, it's like, how do we make content for these people? Not, I made this content, now how do I find people for it? And so when it comes to that B2B approach, that software company, it's like, who is that person we're trying to reach? Let's make content for that person, who's that project manager, who's the decision maker, who's feeling the boss, breathing down their neck. And right. So that's just one example of a client we worked with. But does that make sense when I say it like that?
Yeah, so to break that down, it's essentially identify the customer really, and then look at their pain points, look at how they're currently finding their solutions, how can you make that better for them, how can you make it easier for them.
Yeah, but it's not just pain points. We'll go into like their beliefs and their limiting beliefs. We'll go into what they do for fun, and the beliefs, especially because that's what gets someone really interested. It's not just like, hey, Tim, you're about trying to grow on YouTube so you can make more money. It's like, no, I'm about growing on YouTube so that I can reach more people and change their lives, right? And money is just like something I believe is a tool that we use to further reach people and change their life. Influence. Like our business doesn't try to make and grow influencers. Our people tries to help people grow their influence, right? Like this is about people. This is not about like what you're getting and becoming. This is about like how you're helping other people. And then by doing that, it impacts you and grows your own business and things too. But
okay.
Now I'm definitely off topic. So sorry.
No, I think it's all really interesting stuff. And, for the people listening who are trying to grow their YouTube channels and use YouTube as a strategy for them, understanding the beliefs thing is really interesting. Do you think that's why you have YouTube channels that are so polarizing? You have some YouTube channels that are just like so left, and then others that are just so right. And you kind of have this divide of people wanting to watch the channel that's most aligned with their beliefs. Because I rarely find, I think, channels that are kind of just in the middle. What's your opinions on that?
The channels that are in the middle don't create enough tension for someone to be interested. It's that's why conspiracy theories can do so well, unfortunately, on YouTube, is because it's really intriguing. Now, YouTube's got better systems in place for mitigating some of the risk that goes along with that. But and I'm not saying you can't be middle. There's like, in some ways, none of us are really extremely right or left. Like, we're all kind of probably close. In fact, the data actually shows that we are all more middle than we think the other side really is. But yeah, so not even just politically or religiously or anything like that, but you do need to stand for something. And if you don't, like, no one's going to stand with you for anything. So right and left is kind of a natural, easy one to piggyback off of, but it could be veganism versus carnivore, right? It could be Apple versus PC. It could be Starbucks versus gas station cop. Like, it doesn't really matter. It's just like, you got to stand for something and position yourself against something else.
Got it. So people starting their YouTube channel, you think about what they stand for and what they stand against, and try and make that super clear in their content. And then that'll attract the right crowd for them. Okay.
Yeah, you kind of need haters, unfortunately. So.
There's plenty of those, so that's not a problem.
Yeah, no, they're good for you. That means you're doing something right. I don't mean like the people who just like, your voice is hurting my ears. Like, I don't mean that. I mean like the people who are like, no, I disagree. Like, I say something, like, for example, my family, I run my family, my wife and I had 7 kids in 8 years, so when you have that many kids that fast, you're forced to figure out some things that other families don't bump into. And so the way we run our family is a little bit different in some ways, and the way you run your family if you have 1 or 2 kids. And it's not to say that one way is right or wrong. It's just like, we just have, like, if you have 1 or 2 kids complaining, you can kind of handle it. But if you got 7 kids complaining, you need a better discipline strategy, right? You can't handle it. And so it's just like growing a business. You know, one system might work when you only got 2 people, but when you have 10 employees, like, that system breaks down, you need a better communication system. So the same thing happens in family. So when I talk about things like that, some people are like, you mean you run your family like a business? That feels so blah, 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 whatever. That's not true at all. But you get where I'm going with that, where it's like, you start saying some things, people start aligning themselves one way or the other, whether or not they agree with what you're doing. So it means you're taking a stand for something.
Yeah, no, it's a good example, and you can see, like, you know, the people who want to have that more free-spirited development, and then people who want to have, like, no, I want to be a bit more regimented, a bit more organized. So yeah, as you said, there's beliefs on both sides and almost every niche and category. So it's a good idea to think about, because I didn't even think about that at all when thinking about YouTube channels and how to position it.
That's one of those subliminal things that makes a really big difference, but you wouldn't catch it up front if you didn't know to look for it. Yeah.
Now, I had a few quick questions that's going to help some of the people avoid some mistakes. So what do you think some of the biggest mistakes costing YouTubers the most money or views or subscribers is? Just kind of like off the top of your head.
Yeah, I say when we're working with our clients, like, even just in a one-off, 1 hour, one-on-one private session, the thing that comes up the most is that thing we already talked about, which is like, they don't even know what they stand for or what they're about. I just worked with a channel yesterday who was like working really hard, been at this for years, trying to grow his channel, and he's at like 5.5, a little over 5,000 subscribers. But he's like, for the hundreds of videos I've done, the amount of time I've been doing this, like, I should be further ahead. And I was like, dude, like, I watched a lot of your videos to prep for our session, and like, I still don't really know what I'm going to get in the next video. And so I asked him, like, hey, you finish the sentence, hey guys, subscribe because, and he was like he couldn't finish, he didn't know how to finish it. And then when he did finish it, it was like it was focused primarily on, this is the what idea, which is where most people go with that, instead of what gets the emotional connection going, which leads to more watch time and more people who will more liberally subscribe and enable notifications and things. It's the emotional connection, not the head. So it's like, it's the, hey guys, subscribe because, and then give them a why I do this. Like, you know, like for you guys already heard me say, like, this for me, it's about reaching more people and changing their lives. As a youth and family worker, I was working with, you know, about 80 kids a week and their families. And I love seeing those relationships restored and those lives changed. But when we're reaching 1 million people on YouTube, I hear the same stories of people who are like, I've just got married, didn't know if our marriage was going to make it, but I've been watching your videos and heard you talking with your wife about how you're learning to love each other better, and we have hope again for our marriage. Just thank you.
Wow.
You know, I shared that video with my husband. We talked about it. I'm like, oh, we have people who are like, hey, I didn't grow up with a mom, but my mom left us when I was a kid, but I'm been watching your videos for a while now, and I'm getting married in a few months, and because of your videos, I feel like I know what it takes to be a good mom and a good wife one day. Just thank you. Right? And so I saw like so many of these stories of people who didn't commit suicide and stuff. I'm like, this is a great place to reach more people, like 1 million people a month versus 80 a week, what I was doing. And because of that, it's about reaching people and changing their lives. So when I say that and tell you those stories, you likely have a more, this is going to be weird, but just go with it for a second. You likely have a more emotional connection to me and the brand, because now you understand the story behind what I'm doing and what it means to me, as opposed to me just telling you previously that this is about reaching people and changing their lives, and you maybe roll your eyes in your head a little bit and be like, oh, that sounds nice, and then that's kind of like it, right? But so that's why it's so important that when you say subscribe to my channel, because that mistake is like, they don't even know what the story is that's motivating them to do this on YouTube, and because of that, they don't know what the beliefs are, and they don't have those common elements that make it easy for their channel to gain momentum. Like the analogy we use is like, if you want the type of momentum that a train gets on its tracks, it's almost unstoppable momentum. But you need 2 tracks to run on, and there's not a whole lot of wiggle room there, right?
Yeah.
And you might look at it and be like, those tracks feel restrictive. Like, I actually want to do this thing over here, and then I want to do that thing over there. But it's confusing to your audience. What is this value proposition? These tracks that your train is going to run on. That's not going to be like a one-hit wonder, but it's going to be slowly over time gaining momentum in the right direction with one video versus with the next right video, the next right video that gains momentum over time. That is a much more sustainable channel than someone who grow like we have a client right now was at a just like 2 weeks ago was at less than 10,000 subscribers, and I just looked at their channel today. In 2 weeks they now have 126,000 subscribers in 2 weeks, right? And they have a video that followed all the right principles and just took off. And I hope it's sustainable, but my guess is that it's likely not for this person, because those one-hit wonders.
Hopefully he's not listening.
Yeah, maybe he is. Like, we have a good relationship. I don't care. There's other people we worked with who went from like 250,000 subscribers to 1 million subscribers in only 3 months after spending 6 years to get their 250,000. And then 3 months to get to 1 million, because they just had to unlock a few things and unleash that growth. And for him, it will definitely be sustainable. But the one-hit wonders like are flash in the pan. It's like they got a good video, but they don't yet have a good brand or a good channel that will make it easy for people to want to come back and keep watching more and more. That's the difference. And so, in order to grow, like the biggest mistake is focusing on a video strategy rather than a brand and channel strategy, and defining who are we going after, what do they really want, and what value am I providing, and how do I consistently provide that value, and turn those into the tracks that this train runs on to get momentum.
Okay, yeah, that's really interesting about staying focused. I think that's a great point. And then once you figure out your beliefs, obviously that's way more easy to stay focused. So some of these guys that didn't grow for like 5 or 6 years, what are some of the technical mistakes they were making? Do you ever kind of like bring it down to like someone kind of has a good value proposition, they sort of know their belief, but they're just technically doing stuff wrong? Is there any examples?
Thankfully, there are fewer and fewer technical things you need to worry about. In fact, YouTube says that anything that the creator has to do that the viewer doesn't care about is classified as a bug in their system. So, for example, tags. Your viewers don't care what tags you're using. And YouTube says we really only use them for misspellings. And then in a deeper conversation, they said, if we're going to be honest, the main reason they're still there is because for us to go through all the code and remove it would just be a really big project. And so it's easier for us to just de-emphasize them 100% and not even look at them. So it's like, and people try to get in, the technical stuff just really doesn't matter. If there are technical things, it's more about the technical way of how you craft content in a way that doesn't, the mistake would be how it doesn't connect with the viewer and doesn't create that emotional connection and get them interested to want to learn more, make them feel something. And they're not really technical. There's certainly reproducible strategies that you can implement that make it easier for a first-time viewer to be like, oh my gosh, I love this channel after watching only one video. And so maybe you could call those technical, but we think of them more as just like, how do you connect with people, really?
Okay. Yeah, because you do definitely see different styles of videos where they like show the shock factor in the first few seconds and then they go into how that happened. I always see this mainly in like baking and cooking. They show you the end product and then they show you how they made it. So yeah, it's definitely how you sort of hook people early on as well, I think. Some of the content that I've seen is like really, really good, but they don't get into it until 45 seconds in, and by then you've lost most of your people.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. The title and thumbnail set an expectation that isn't delivered quickly enough. In the opening seconds, you'll have high abandonment, things like that. But even then, I don't know, I guess you consider that technical. In my I was kind of thinking that more in terms of still how do you connect with the viewer. But now you're in that case, you're trying to connect with someone who's never heard of you before and frankly doesn't care about you. The only reason they click is that title and thumbnail created some intrigue, created some tension in their brain, sparked some curiosity that they're trying to alleviate now. And the way that they're alleviating that tension is by clicking. And so it's really not about, hey guys, welcome to my channel, welcome. And you start talking about yourself for 10 minutes or something for getting the content. It's like opening up with what that first time viewer expected to get, and then using that as an opportunity to introduce them to you and your brand and your story and your belief and your creed so that the emotional connection starts to build. And by the end of that video, they're like, ooh, I like this. This was a good video. I want to watch more. The only language they have to put to it is this was a quote unquote good video. But the language that we know to use is like, okay, these are the things that is integrated into this content that makes it easy for them to feel like it's a good video. And it really isn't as much about production and technical stuff as much as it's about how do we make someone feel.
Got it. So in your opinion, should YouTubers start their content with like talking about who they are and that sort of thing? Or they shouldn't even go into that? They should just jump straight into the value add, the solution that they're solving or the emotion that they're trying to provoke?
Yeah, it all depends on what the title and thumbnail is. Like, what's the content? Is this a story? If this like how I, like I'll say how I helped, let's say like last year we worked with over 650 clients. So how I helped 660 creators grow in however many billion views we did last month or last year. I don't know. Like, let's say that's the title. Well, then it would make sense for me to start that video talking about myself. And because it aligns with the expectation that the title and thumbnail set. But if the title and thumbnail is like how to keep your chickens warm during the winter, right? And now I'm opening up talking about like myself, you're like, that doesn't make as much sense, right? So
So you got to think of the purpose of the video too.
Oh yeah,
nice.
Openings, and then you can talk about yourself as you go through it, but it always has to come back to aligning with the value prop of the channel and what the video is all about.
Nice. Yeah, it's good advice. Jumping straight into the value. Now this question is a little bit more about you. So you run videocreators.com, and looking back on everything that you've done, what do you wish or what do you think you would have done differently if you were to do it all again? In terms of growing your business, not necessarily other people's channels.
What would I do differently? I was going to grow my business all over again.
I guess it's something that took longer than you thought, or something that you did that was like just super expensive and wasn't worth it, or something you invested a ton of time in and just had no return.
You know, that's a good question. It's hard to answer because on one hand, it's like all the mistakes I made is what led me to where we are today. And so if I hadn't had made those mistakes and wasted all the time on those things that didn't work, would I be here? Probably not, right? So it's all those obstacles are things that the character needs to go through in order to experience the transformation they want to experience at the end of their story. And it's not a good story if the character gets what they wanted without obstacles. Like, no one wants to watch that story. And I believe that the same principles that make for a good story are also what makes for a good life. And so we actually need those obstacles and conflicts in order to get the thing we really want. I think along the way, though, we find out that the thing we thought we wanted isn't necessarily what we actually wanted. So, for example, sorry for the kid analogies. I got 7 little kids. So, but like pick the movie Cars and Pixar, for example, right? Yep. Starts off with he thinks he wants to win the Piston Cup, but by the end, what he really wants are like meaningful relationships. And so like you got to make all the mistakes about winning and losing the Piston Cup in order to really get the thing you found out that you really wanted. So I hope maybe that's too deep and way off track, but I know what you're asking though. I'm not trying to avoid the question. I'm just trying to figure out what would be the main thing that I wish I would.
Everything is perfect. You wouldn't want to change anything.
No, it was not perfect by any, and like even right now, it's not perfect at all. But I kind of embrace the suck as like this is part of the process of getting to where we need to be. I guess if there's one thing I would do a little differently, but again, I wouldn't have known that this is the direction I needed to go years ago, is, if I say that we are really all about reaching people and changing their lives, I think the way we were doing that previously, I thought I was doing that, I should say, with like selling online courses and things. We do have courses that we sell, but they help a lot of people. So I'm not downplaying, belittling myself. But when I look at the percentage of people who come out of like just buying premium content and going through our channel growth process, I wouldn't say it changes a lot of people's lives. I say it makes people feel good about they feel good about their purchase, and they feel good about the information they learned. But what percentage of those people take that information and actually translate it to results and success on their channel? Not very many. And I don't think it's my fault. It's just a lot of people like to buy and learn things, but still never press record on their camera. They never actually even move forward with actually implementing it. And so that makes me feel like I wasted their time and they gave me money. Like, I want to feel good about the work I do. And so if you just give me money, like, I don't feel good about that transaction if you don't use it to change people's lives, even though you feel good about your purchase. So when I look at where we actually change people's lives, like our clients' lives, is when we work with them in a one-on-one setting, and we actually get to build that. It's built into our mission, is that we provide expertise and authentic relationships that equip creators to grow their audience and their business while changing more lives. Most people come to us for the expertise, but what we do is we want to build the authentic relationships. And then when you have someone like who's building an authentic relationship with you, who is genuinely interested in your project, in your business, in your channel, and your goals, that's where we see life change happen first for that creator. And because of their channel and their business growing and things, and then life change that happens in everyone they're reaching through that business in their audience. So it's got like this ripple effect that spreads. And so if I was going to go back and change something, I think I would have gone more for client services, more so than just selling information. Selling information is a much easier business model. It's much more lucrative too, honestly. Like you can make more money at that, and you don't have all the headaches with, like, I have 9 people on my team now and hiring more strategists. It's more complicated, but it's worth it to me because that's where we change people's lives the most. So I wish I would have gone probably more that business model direction at an earlier point. But again, I wouldn't have known that unless I had sold so many courses and started having that realization. So.
Okay, interesting. And so on the flip side of that, you said that, you did go through a lot of challenges and you think that's why you are where you are now. What were some of the biggest challenges that you kind of like overcame, but then had the biggest impact in your growth?
The biggest challenge, so basically what happened is the video creators started growing, and we started having more and more momentum in the business and clients, people wanting stuff. So I think the first mistake that held me back is I hadn't even personally really taken my own advice that I shared with you guys here, which is I hadn't really clearly defined who I am and what I want my brand to be. And so because of that, we were doing everything from channel management for people. We were doing consulting. We were doing trainings, and like we were doing like all this stuff. And at a certain point, as we grew, it just became unsustainable because I remember this moment distinctly. I was on a treadmill at the YMCA, and I was listening to a book by Mike Michalowicz called that wasn't Profit First. What was it called? The Pumpkin Seed. That's what it was. And his point was, if you want to grow a prize-winning pumpkin, you have to plant a prize-winning, or AKA business. You have to plant a prize-winning seed, and then you need to water it. You need to nurture it. And then as that vine begins to grow, you need to cut off a lot of the pumpkins that are growing in order to send all the nutrients to grow one big pumpkin. And he called all of those other pumpkins, he said, those are distractions disguised as opportunities. And I was like, oh my goodness, like a light bulb moment. I was like, I have so many distractions that are disguised as opportunities. And so I took that, long story short, I fired a bunch of clients that I didn't like working with. We stopped doing channel management for people because I was like, people pay for this and it pays well, but I don't actually think it's really helpful for them. And so the way you grow a business, a prize-winning business, is to send all the nutrients to that one thing you want to do better than anyone else in the world. And I started asking my question, what is the one thing I want to do better than anyone else in the world? and I said, I came down to, I want to do channel strategy for people who are already growing their channels. And I want to be the best in the world at that. And so we cut off a lot of revenue. We fired clients by like 60%. And my wife was like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "I know, but like I can't. This is unsustainable to keep going this direction." That's right. I got to get more focused on one thing. And so that was really scary. But within 3 months, we had made back all the revenue we lost, doing now things that were more aligned with something that was more scalable going forward. I think that kind of leads into the second thing I wish I would have done more sooner, was put together Implement Systems, a really good book called E-Myth that talks more about like the reason you can go to any McDonald's in the world and get the same experience is because they have systems that are down to a T for absolutely every little thing. And so they're hiring and training people to just run these systems. And so for me to grow, I needed more scalable systems. And that was difficult for me. It's like, how do you scale expertise and experience on YouTube into other people? But it was hard, but I was able to do it. And that's part of why we are able to continue growing now, is because I figured out how to take someone in about 3 to 6 months of full-time work, be able to turn them into a strategist that is now helping our clients reproduce success. So yeah, systems are probably number 2. And then I think the third thing that the hard thing was for me to overcome was when the business continued to grow and I was constantly the bottleneck for growth, for momentum, for everything, because I was doing everything. I was editing the videos, I was shooting the videos, planning the content, providing all the services to the clients. And I distinctly remember this time I was in the basement of our house, just sitting on the floor being like, I cannot keep going at this rate. I'm tired. I'm losing the love I used to have for this thing. And it's paying our bills. And that was part of the problem, because I was full time on it, but I couldn't afford to let any of the spinning plates drop because we couldn't afford to lose that revenue. So the next issue was then scaling, putting good systems in place, what I talked about, but then being able to train other people to run those systems and produce the same predictable results as I was getting for clients. And now it's at a point where you have 9 people, and I'm not even in the content half the time anymore on our channel or podcasts and stuff, which is, it's wonderful. My goal isn't to separate from it, but it is to certainly empower other people. So I'm playing more of a CEO level role now, where it's more on like big picture, vision, direction, key relationships and partnerships and things like that. And other people are doing the work. But I wish I would have figured that out and learned that sooner, because it would have avoided a lot of burnout that I was hitting. Is how do I work with other people and train and build a business that allows me to even pay them in the first place. So
Well, surprisingly, that's actually one of the learnings, or one of the challenges that a lot of people state on when we talk to them. Hiring earlier, hiring good people, creating good systems. And, you moving to that CEO role allows you to make an actual bigger impact, because you can work on bigger picture projects that lead to, 1,000 times growth, as opposed to focusing on like 1 to 2% growth. Great feedback there. And obviously, hopefully other people can learn this before they go through it.
I don't know if there is any way to really learn it until you go through it, but yes, exactly. It's a learning curve for everyone. Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to wrap it up with these final few questions. So you've worked with some amazing brands like Disney, HBO, all these guys. What's kind of like some of the, what's one piece of advice that you usually give these larger channels? And then what's one piece of advice you give to smaller channels?
When I think of larger channels, I don't think of HBO necessarily. I think of maybe someone like Dr. Mike or the King of Random, or Chad Wildclay, some of these other channels. The advice to those bigger, more like multi-million subscriber channels is that you'd be surprised how many of them are still just kind of flying by the seat of their pants when it comes to their content. And they're doing the same thing that got them to that place, But what they don't often realize is the thing that got them there will not be the thing that gets them to the next level. So it's very common for them to peter out at around 1 million subscribers or 2.5, or at some point they meter out. They peter out. They just plateau. And then they get confused and frustrated because they're like, I'm doing the same thing I've always done. Why is it not working? And the problem is, you're right. You're doing the same thing you've always done. Not even a good television series lasts more than 7 seasons before it's off the air. And that's only like 93 episodes. And you've done hundreds and hundreds, right? So it's time to reinvent yourself. What does version 2.0 look like? But at that point, you're not just like taking a random guess of like, well, let's try this thing instead. You've got gobs and gobs and gobs of data that you can use to learn a ton. And most of those bigger creators really are just kind of relying on their instincts and not on their data. And that's part of what leads to their plateau and then eventual decline, is because one, they haven't reinvented themselves, but even when they do, they haven't done it in a smart way that's based on all the data that's in there. And so the second thing for them is not using your analytics to your advantage, not learning how to use it to spot opportunities for growth, and using that to really solidify the growth for your brand and your channel.
Yeah. So when you say, just before we move on to the small, so when you say looking at your analytics for opportunities, is that looking at like videos that did really well, themes that did really well? What's the sort of analytics that they're looking for?
It depends. When we work with one creator, and I'll share with you some info, so I won't say who they are, but they have like 7 million subscribers. They were like, they were still at that spot where they couldn't figure, and it's very, I guess, even common for big creators. They couldn't figure out like what's the difference between a video that for them gets like 300,000 views versus a video that gets 1 million views. Like they had no idea like how to, and like, well, it's all in your analytics, it's in your data. Like YouTube has tons of info there. And so we dug into it for them and found out like, hey, the difference for you, and this isn't true for everyone, but the difference for their channel is that if they had a click-through rate on an end screen at a certain percentage of higher, and that video extended the viewing session, it would be a 1 million view video plus. If they had a certain percentage or lower on their end screens, and that video didn't extend the viewing session, or on the end screen specifically, because that indicates they got a viewer to the end of the content and they still wanted to keep going, then it would be 300,000 views or less. And so it became easy to predict pretty quickly based on their in-screen click-through rates. Does this video, 1, hold someone's attention to the end, and then 2, compel them to want to watch more? And so that would be the metric that we started learning, like we need to reproduce this. It helps to start learning what we need to reproduce better in the content. That's just one example. There's tons of other things. Sometimes we'll take use the groups feature in analytics and put all of their, let's say all their thumbnails that have their face in it versus all the thumbnails, another group that don't have someone else's face in it. I'm just making this up top of my head. And then we'll use the compare button in their analytics to evaluate the data and like, oh, look, when you have your face in it, it gets 3.5% more clicks than if it doesn't have, but it's only with your subscribers. And so in order to grow the channel, really need to focus on this instead, which is where your non-subscribers are clicking on. Apparently they don't know or care about your face, right? So it kind of just depends on what the goal is, what the problems the channel's facing and things. So there's not like a set metric that's like, oh, everyone just needs to look at this one thing. But yeah, does that answer the question?
Yeah, very well. And then what about smaller channels? You know, the guys who are sort of just getting started, maybe they're under 5,000 subs.
Yeah, they still haven't, most of the time, they still haven't figured out who they are, what they're all about. They still don't have a good subscribe because statement for them, a good value proposition that goes, and maybe they do, but it's like, subscribe because I'm funny, or subscribe because like we make family videos, or something that's like doesn't really mean anything.
Super vague.
Right? Yeah. And they're thinking in terms of of genre or niche as opposed to thinking in terms of value that I'm providing. And that's really like, what is the benefit or the reward for your viewer? If they were to watch every video on your channel, what's that benefit or reward that they would get? And can you articulate what that is and then make that train run on those rails? So that's almost always a main issue when it comes to those channels.
Nice. And we talked a lot about that. So hopefully guys starting out will we'll be able to get that. And Tim, this has been an amazing episode. So much good value out of this. So many interesting things about YouTube, giving some great examples, focusing on, staying on the tracks. Where can people go to learn more about you, connect with you, look at your content? If they're interested in more stuff, where can they find you? This is your moment to direct people where
Yeah, we have a weekly podcast. You can search iTunes or SoundCloud, Stitcher, wherever you listen to your podcast. Just search for our Video Creators Podcast, and it's me and two of the other strategists on my team. We get in there every week and just share. We go in the deeper level, next level tactics. It's not the how do I upload a custom thumbnail type of stuff. It's like those the more established creators. It's the strategy that they're looking for. So we do that every week there. We also have a YouTube channel, video at youtube.com/. I can't even say it. I'm talking too fast. Sorry. youtube.com/video creators. And then all of our courses and in-depth trainings and things. I know I kind of dogged myself a little bit there, but if that's something that anyone is interested in, like what does that growth process look like, and you want to get deeper into the strategies of how do I build an emotional connection with my audience and get them very quickly to want to resonate with my content and my brand and want more, our course 30 Days to a Better YouTube Channel is a very practical step-by-step process that will help you implement that. So you can find that at videocreators.com.
Yeah, it's probably a good foundation point too. If you are under the 5,000 subs or you're just getting started, build that foundation and then work your way up to, maybe looking at consultation services and, working with people one-on-one. Because I know the price point is one of the big things. Like, courses unleash so much value to at a lower price point just because it's so available. So maybe that's a good starting point for the smaller brands. And then bigger brands. You got to go that one-on-one and really get that hands-on service. But Tim, thank you so much for this episode. It's been amazing. I've learned a ton about, what we should actually be doing because we definitely need to do a better job.
Cool. Well,
so
thanks for
hopefully all
having
the
me.
listeners got it as well. Thank you.
Yeah.